In a big, busy city where people cared more about money and status than anything else, there lived a man named Charles Whitmore. He was no ordinary person. He had built his own tech empire from scratch. Starting with nothing but a dream and hard work, he turned himself into a millionaire by the time he was in his 40s. His life looked perfect from the outside. A fancy penthouse, expensive cars, and all the luxuries money could buy. But deep inside, Charles felt empty. All the wealth in the world couldn't fill the loneliness that followed him everywhere. One rainy afternoon, Charles decided to visit an orphanage as part of a charity event. He didn't think much of it at first. It was just another way to give back to society, something expected of someone in his position. The orphanage was old and worn out, its walls painted in faded colors. Inside, kids ran around playing games or sat quietly in corners, lost in their own worlds. As Charles walked through the building, shaking hands and smiling politely, one little girl caught his eye. She was sitting alone on a wooden bench near the window, her legs pulled up to her chest. Her hair was messy, and her clothes were too big for her tiny frame. She looked different from the other children, quieter, almost like she didn't belong there. When Charles approached her, she didn't look up right away. Instead, she kept staring out the window, watching the raindrops slide down the glass. "Hi," Charles said softly, trying not to startle her. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily." Charles knelt down so they were at eye level. "Do you mind if I sit here?" he asked, pointing to the space next to her. Emily shrugged, which Charles took as permission. He sat beside her, noticing how tightly she clutched a small puzzle box in her hands. It was a Rubik's Cube, half solved. "Already? That's quite a challenge," Charles remarked, nodding toward the cube. "Are you good at solving puzzles?" Emily finally looked at him, her dark eyes sharp and curious. Without saying a word, she twisted the cube a few times until all the colors matched perfectly. Charles blinked in surprise. "Most adults would struggle with that, let alone a 7-year-old child." "You're really smart," Charles said, genuinely impressed. Emily didn't respond. Instead, she picked up another puzzle from the bench and started working on it. Watching her, Charles felt something stir inside him, a mix of admiration and sadness. This little girl seemed so full of potential, yet trapped in a place where no one truly understood her. Over the next hour, Charles stayed with Emily, asking questions and learning bits and pieces about her. She rarely spoke, but when she did, her words carried weight. She told him she liked books, especially ones about science and math. She also loved figuring things out, whether it was puzzles or patterns in nature. There was a spark in her that reminded Charles of himself when he was younger, curious, determined, and hungry to learn. When it was time to leave, Charles found himself reluctant to go. Before stepping out of the orphanage, he turned to the caretaker and asked about Emily's background. What he learned broke his heart. Emily had been abandoned as a baby and spent most of her life bouncing between foster homes and institutions. Teachers described her as difficult because she wouldn't follow rules or participate in group activities. Some even suggested she might have behavioral issues, but Charles saw none of that. To him, Emily wasn't difficult, she was extraordinary. Sure, she was quiet and reserved, but those traits only made her more intriguing. He couldn't stop thinking about her even after leaving the orphanage. That night, as he lay awake in his luxurious bed, an idea began forming in his mind, an idea that would change both their lives forever. The next morning, Charles called his lawyer and asked about the process of adopting a child. The lawyer sounded surprised, but quickly laid out the steps. Friends and colleagues were equally shocked when they heard what Charles planned to do. "Why adopt now? You're almost 50, some said. Others warned him that taking in a child like Emily could be risky. "She's not normal," they whispered behind his back. "You'll regret this." But Charles didn't listen. Deep down, he knew what he wanted, to give Emily the chance she deserved. More importantly, he believed in her. He believed she had greatness within her, waiting to be unlocked. And despite the doubts and criticism, he moved forward with the adoption. When Emily officially became part of his family, the journey ahead felt uncertain. Could a self-made millionaire and a shy, misunderstood little girl really form a bond? Would the world accept them, or continue to judge them harshly? Only time would tell. But Charles was ready to face whatever came their way. After all, sometimes the best decisions are the ones that seem crazy to everyone else. Little did anyone know, including Charles himself, that this decision would set off a chain of events that would astonish the entire world. Life in Charles's penthouse was a strange mix of luxury and awkwardness for Emily. The place was nothing like the orphanage she had known. Everything gleamed, from the marble floors to the massive windows that offered breathtaking views of the city skyline. But despite all the beauty around her, Emily felt out of place. It wasn't just the fancy furniture or the endless supply of food. It was the silence. For someone who had spent years surrounded by noise, kids shouting, doors slamming, arguments echoing through hallways, the quiet of Charles's home felt almost suffocating. At first, Emily stuck to herself, keeping to small corners of the apartment, where she could retreat into her own world. She brought along her favorite puzzles and books, using them as shields against the unfamiliarity of her new life. Charles noticed this but didn't push her. He understood that adjusting to such a drastic change wouldn't happen overnight. Instead, he gave her space while making sure she knew he was there if she needed him. Every morning, Charles would knock gently on her bedroom door before heading to work. "Breakfast is ready," he'd say softly, letting her decide whether to join him or not. Most days, Emily stayed in her room nibbling on toast or fruit when hunger finally drove her out. But even though she kept her distance, Charles found ways to connect with her. He started leaving notes on the dining table, little messages like, "You're doing great," or "Let me know if you need anything." Sometimes he'd slip a book beside her plate, something he thought she might enjoy. Slowly, these small gestures began to break down the walls she had built around herself. One weekend, Charles decided to take Emily shopping. He figured it would be a good way for them to spend time together and help her feel more comfortable in her new surroundings. When they arrived at the store, Emily froze. Bright lights, rows of shiny clothes, and bustling shoppers overwhelmed her. She clung to Charles's hand tightly, her knuckles turning white. Seeing her discomfort, Charles quickly changed plans. Instead of forcing her to shop, he took her to a nearby park. They sat on a bench under a tree, watching ducks swim lazily in the pond. For the first time since moving in, Emily smiled. A tiny, hesitant smile, but enough to warm Charles's heart. Back at home, Emily slowly started exploring her environment. One day, Charles came back from work to find her sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. She glanced up at him briefly before returning her focus to the task. Curious, Charles joined her, offering to help. Together they worked in silence, fitting pieces together until the picture emerged, a serene mountain landscape. That evening marked the beginning of a new routine. Every night after dinner, they would sit together and solve puzzles or play board games. These moments became their bonding time, a way for them to communicate without words. But outside their cozy little bubble, opinions about their unusual family dynamic continued to swirl. Friends and acquaintances couldn't understand why Charles had chosen to adopt a child so late in life, especially one who seemed so different. At social gatherings, people whispered behind his back, calling Emily strange or withdrawn. Some even suggested she might have emotional problems that Charles hadn't considered. Despite their criticisms, Charles remained unfazed. He saw qualities in Emily that others missed: her sharp mind, her determination, and her quiet strength. School proved to be another challenge. Charles enrolled Emily in one of the city's most prestigious private schools, hoping to provide her with the best education possible. However, her teachers struggled to figure her out. She rarely raised her hand in class, preferring to observe, rather than participate. During group activities, she often drifted off into her own thoughts, ignoring instructions. Her classmates teased her for being weird, and some parents complained to the administration, claiming she disrupted the learning environment. Yet whenever test results came back, Emily stunned everyone. Whether it was math, science, or logic puzzles, she consistently scored higher than anyone else in her grade, even students twice her age. By the time she turned 10, She was solving university-level physics problems during lunch breaks, scribbling equations on napkins while other kids played tag outside. Teachers marveled at her abilities but still labeled her unfocused and peculiar. To many, her brilliance felt unsettling, like a mystery they couldn't quite unravel. Charles, however, saw things differently. He recognized that Emily's mind worked in ways most people couldn't comprehend. While others dismissed her quirks as flaws, he viewed them as strengths. He encouraged her to embrace her unique talents, providing her with resources to explore her interests further. He hired tutors to guide her through advanced subjects, bought her science kits and coding tools, and set up a small study area in the apartment where she could experiment freely. Despite the challenges, Emily thrived under Charles's care. With each passing month, she grew more confident, venturing beyond her comfort zone to tackle bigger projects. One day, she surprised Charles by showing him a model rocket she had built entirely on her own. "I read about how rockets work," she explained shyly, holding it up for him to inspect. "Can we launch it?" Charles grinned, thrilled by her enthusiasm. "Of course," he said. "Let's go to the park tomorrow." The next afternoon, they stood in an open field, counting down as Emily prepared to launch her creation. The rocket soared into the sky, leaving a trail of smoke behind. Emily's face lit up with pure joy. For the first time, Charles saw her truly happy, not just content, but glowing with excitement. In that moment, he realized how much progress she had made since coming into his life. She was no longer the withdrawn little girl he had met at the orphanage. She was blossoming into someone remarkable, someone destined for greatness. As weeks turned into months, Charles and Emily settled into a rhythm that worked for both of them. Their relationship evolved from cautious coexistence to genuine companionship. Though outsiders still questioned their bond, neither of them paid much attention. They were too busy building a life filled with discovery, trust, and mutual respect. And though neither of them knew it yet, their journey was only beginning. What lay ahead would test their resilience, challenge societal norms, and ultimately prove that sometimes the unlikeliest connections can lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. As Emily grew older, her brilliance became impossible to ignore. By the time she entered her teenage years, she wasn't just excelling, she was rewriting the rules of what people thought was possible for someone her age. It started subtly at first. During one of her late-night study sessions, Charles walked into her room to find her scribbling furiously on a whiteboard he had installed for her. The board was covered in equations and diagrams that looked like they belonged in a university lecture hall, not the bedroom of a 12-year-old. "What's all this?" Charles asked, pointing to the chaotic swirl of numbers and symbols. Emily glanced up briefly, her face glowing with excitement. "It's about quantum mechanics," she said matter-of-factly. "I've been reading about how particles behave, and I think I figured out a way to simplify some of the calculations." Charles blinked, unsure whether to laugh or be amazed. "You're 12, he reminded her gently. "Most kids your age are still learning basic algebra." Emily shrugged. "Basic algebra is boring." That night, Charles couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about what Emily had shown him. Was it really possible for a child to grasp concepts that baffled adults? To test her theory, he reached out to an old friend who taught physics at a nearby university. The professor agreed to meet with Emily, though he admitted he was skeptical. "Kids don't usually understand quantum mechanics," he joked over the phone. "Let's see if she surprises me." The meeting took place in the professor's office, a cluttered space filled with books and papers stacked haphazardly on every surface. Emily sat across from him, clutching a notebook filled with her calculations. At first, the professor asked simple questions to gauge her understanding, but as the conversation progressed, his tone shifted from casual curiosity to genuine astonishment. By the end of their discussion, he was leaning forward in his chair, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This is incredible," he said finally, flipping through Emily's notes. "These are advanced ideas, and you've simplified them in ways I've never seen before. Have you considered publishing this?" Emily nodded shyly. "I wanted to, but I didn't know how." The professor promised to help her draft a paper and submit it to a scientific journal. A few months later, Emily's work appeared in print, a groundbreaking analysis of particle behavior that caught the attention of academics around the world. Overnight, she went from being an unknown teenager to a prodigy whose name was whispered in awe at conferences and seminars. But fame came with its own set of challenges. As word spread about Emily's achievements, critics began to emerge. Some accused her of having unfair advantages, claiming her success was due to Charles's wealth rather than her own abilities. Others dismissed her as a one-hit wonder, suggesting she had simply gotten lucky. Anonymous online forums buzzed with speculation about her mental health, labeling her robotic and emotionless. These accusations stung, but Emily refused to let them define her. Instead, she channeled her frustration into action, determined to prove her worth through sheer determination and hard work. Charles stood by her side throughout it all, shielding her from negativity whenever he could. He hired publicists to manage media requests, ensuring interviews were handled professionally without overwhelming her. He also encouraged her to focus on what truly mattered, her passion for discovery. Together, they transformed their penthouse into a hub of innovation. One corner became a makeshift lab where Emily conducted experiments, while another housed shelves lined with textbooks and research papers. Charles even converted the guest room into a library stocked with rare manuscripts and journals, giving Emily access to knowledge most people could only dream of. Despite the growing attention, Emily remained humble. She continued attending school, though her presence there often felt like a formality. Her teachers struggled to keep up with her, assigning projects that barely scratched the surface of her capabilities. Frustrated by the lack of challenge, Emily began skipping classes to work on her own projects. At first, the school administration threatened disciplinary action, but Charles intervened, explaining that traditional education wasn't suited to someone like Emily. Reluctantly, they agreed to let her pursue independent studies under the guidance of external mentors. During this time, Emily's relationship with Charles deepened. They spent hours discussing theories, debating solutions to complex problems, and brainstorming new ideas. Charles marveled at her ability to think outside the box, often finding himself inspired by her creativity. In return, Emily cherished his unwavering support. While others doubted her, Charles believed in her completely, a fact that gave her the confidence to push boundaries others deemed impossible. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Emily looked up from her laptop and smiled. "Do you remember when we launched that rocket in the park?" she asked. Charles chuckled. "How could I forget? You nearly scared the ducks away." "I've been working on something bigger," Emily said, her voice tinged with excitement. "Something that could change everything." Curious, Charles leaned closer. "Tell me more." For the next hour, Emily explained her latest project. A compact battery capable of storing massive amounts of energy using sustainable materials. Unlike traditional batteries, which relied on harmful chemicals, hers used innovative technology to harness power efficiently and safely. If successful, it could revolutionize industries ranging from transportation to renewable energy. Charles listened intently, his heart swelling with pride. "This is incredible," he said when she finished. "You're going to change the world." Emily blushed, unused to receiving such praise. "We'll see," she murmured. "But I'm going to try." Over the next year, Emily poured all her energy into developing her invention. With Charles funding her research and providing moral support, she worked tirelessly, testing prototypes and refining designs. Late nights became the norm, with both of them surviving on cups of coffee and takeout meals. Their shared mission brought them even closer, turning their home into a sanctuary of creativity and ambition. When Emily finally unveiled her prototype, the response was overwhelming. Scientists hailed it as a breakthrough, while environmentalists praised its potential to combat climate change. News outlets clamored for interviews, eager to learn more about the teenage genius behind the invention. For the first time, Emily stepped into the spotlight, not because she sought fame, but because she wanted the world to understand the importance of her work. Through it all, Charles watched proudly as his daughter transformed from a quiet, misunderstood child into a global icon. Critics who once mocked him for adopting her now called him visionary, crediting him with recognizing her potential when no one else did. But Charles knew better. This journey wasn't about him. It was about Emily. She was the one who had defied expectations, proving that brilliance knows no age or background. And yet, despite her growing success, Emily never lost sight of what mattered most: the bond she shared with Charles. Every milestone, every achievement was celebrated together, a testament to the power of belief, trust, and unconditional love. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: their story was far from over. By the time Emily turned 18, her name was everywhere. News headlines called her the prodigy who changed energy storage and the teenager revolutionizing sustainability. Her invention, a compact, eco-friendly battery capable of powering entire cities, had taken industries by storm. Governments sought her advice, corporations begged for partnerships, and universities invited her to speak at conferences around the world. Overnight, she went from being a shy girl with a notebook full of equations to one of the most influential figures of her generation. But fame wasn't easy. With success came scrutiny. Reporters followed her every move, dissecting her words and actions in search of flaws. Critics questioned whether Charles had manipulated her rise to fame, suggesting that his wealth played a bigger role than her talent. Some even accused him of using her as a publicity stunt to boost his own reputation. The whispers stung, not just because they targeted Emily, but also because they undermined everything Charles had done for her. Despite the negativity, Emily refused to let it derail her. She knew better than anyone how much hard work and love had gone into her journey. Every sleepless night spent perfecting her designs, every failed prototype, every moment of doubt had shaped her into who she was today. And through it all, Charles had been there, cheering her on when no one else believed in her. That unwavering support meant more to her than any award or accolade ever could. To silence her critics, Emily shifted her focus toward giving back. Using profits from her patents, she founded an initiative aimed at providing education and clean energy to underserved communities. She traveled to remote villages where children studied under candlelight because electricity was a luxury they couldn't afford. There, she installed solar panels powered by her batteries, lighting up classrooms and homes for the first time. Watching kids laugh and play under bright lights brought tears to her eyes. It reminded her of her own childhood, when opportunities felt out of reach. Charles joined her on many of these trips, marveling at how far she had come. He remembered the quiet little girl he had adopted years ago, sitting alone in an orphanage with nothing but puzzles to keep her company. Now here she was, standing in front of crowds, speaking passionately about making the world a better place. It filled him with pride, but also humility. He realized that adopting Emily hadn't just changed her life, it had transformed his, too. For so long he had lived only for himself, chasing success without truly understanding what it meant to connect with another human being. But Emily taught him the value of compassion, patience, and unconditional love. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. They weren't just father and daughter anymore, they were teammates, partners in a mission to leave the world better than they found it. Together they brainstormed ideas, tackled challenges, and celebrated victories. When Emily delivered speeches at global forums, she always made sure to acknowledge Charles, thanking him for believing in her when no one else did. Those moments often left Charles teary-eyed, overwhelmed by gratitude for the family they had built together. Public perception began to shift as well. Once ridiculed for adopting a child, others dismissed as different, Charles was now hailed as visionary. People admired his courage in taking a chance on someone society had overlooked. Journalists wrote stories about their unconventional family, highlighting how Charles's faith in Emily had sparked a chain reaction of innovation and goodwill. Even those who had doubted them initially admitted they had been wrong. Love, it seemed, had triumphed over judgment. Still, the road wasn't without bumps. As Emily's influence grew, so did the pressure to maintain her image as a genius and humanitarian. She juggled speaking engagements, research projects, and charity work, often working late into the night. Charles noticed the toll it was taking on her. Dark circles under her eyes, skipped meals, and moments of exhaustion she tried to hide. Concerned, he sat her down one evening after a particularly grueling day. "You don't have to do everything at once," he said gently. "The world will still be here tomorrow." Emily sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I know, but sometimes it feels like I'm running out of time. There's so much to fix, so many people who need help." Charles nodded, understanding her. "Drive. You've already done more than most people can dream of. Don't forget to take care of yourself along the way." His words resonated with her. Over the next few weeks, Emily started setting boundaries, saying no to events that drained her energy and carving out time for rest. She reconnected with hobbies she had neglected, like painting and reading fiction. Slowly, she rediscovered the joy in life outside of work. Charles encouraged her to embrace these moments, reminding her that balance was key to sustaining her impact. One evening, as they sat together watching the sunset from their penthouse balcony, Emily turned to Charles with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we hadn't met?" she asked. Charles smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "All the time," he admitted. "But then I think about how lucky I am that we did. You've given my life meaning. Kiddo, before you I didn't know what it meant to truly care about someone else. Now I can't imagine life without you." Emily felt a lump form in her throat. She reached over and hugged him tightly, grateful for the man who had changed her life forever. In that moment, she realized something profound. Success wasn't measured by awards or recognition. It was about the connections you made, the lives you touched, and the love you shared. And in that regard, both of them had succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. As the sun dipped below the skyline, casting golden hues across the city, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges ahead wouldn't be easy, but she faced them with confidence, knowing she had Charles by her side. Together, they had defied expectations, silenced critics, and proven that sometimes the craziest decisions lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. What lay ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Their journey was far from over. And whatever came next, they would face it together, as a family bound not by blood but by belief, trust, and an unshakable bond that had stood the test of time. Years passed and Emily's influence only grew stronger. Her battery invention became a cornerstone of sustainable energy solutions worldwide. Cities powered by her technology saw cleaner air, reduced carbon footprints, and brighter futures for their residents. What started as a single idea in a teenager's notebook had transformed into a global movement, inspiring millions to rethink how they used resources. But Emily didn't stop there. She continued pushing boundaries, tackling new challenges with the same determination that had defined her journey from the beginning. One of her most ambitious projects involved creating affordable educational tools for children in underserved areas. Growing up in an orphanage, she knew firsthand how limited access to quality education could stifle potential. With Charles's help, she designed portable learning kits equipped with solar-powered tablets preloaded with lessons in science, math, and languages. These kits were distributed to schools in remote regions, giving kids opportunities they never thought possible. For many, it was the first time they'd held a device capable of connecting them to the wider world. Charles watched proudly as Emily poured her heart into these initiatives. He often accompanied her on trips to villages where the learning kits were being implemented. Seeing children light up with excitement as they explored knowledge for the first time reminded him why he had adopted her all those years ago. It wasn't just about giving her a better life, it was about empowering her to create a better future for others. And now, watching her inspire countless young minds, he felt his decision validated in ways he couldn't have imagined. As Emily's fame reached new heights, public perception of Charles shifted dramatically. Once criticized for adopting a child others deemed too different, he was now celebrated as a visionary who had recognized genius when no one else did. People marveled at his ability to see beyond societal norms and invest in someone whose potential was hidden beneath layers of misunderstanding. Journalists wrote glowing profiles about their unique family dynamic, calling it a testament to the power of unconditional love and belief. But despite the praise, Charles remained humble. He insisted that the real credit belonged to Emily. "I just gave her a chance," he would say during interviews. "She's the one who turned that chance into something extraordinary." His words resonated deeply with audiences, reinforcing the idea that everyone deserves an opportunity to shine, even if they don't fit traditional molds. Meanwhile, Emily faced her own set of challenges. As her responsibilities multiplied, so did the pressure to maintain her image as both a scientific pioneer and a humanitarian leader. Balancing research, charity work, and personal life proved difficult, especially as demands on her time increased exponentially. Reporters hounded her constantly, seeking sound bites and photo ops. Critics scrutinized every move, waiting for any misstep they could exploit. The weight of expectations sometimes left her feeling overwhelmed. During one particularly stressful period, Emily confided in Charles. They were sitting in their living room late at night, surrounded by stacks of papers and half-empty cups of tea. "Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Like no matter what I do, it's never enough." Charles put down his cup and leaned forward, his expression soft but serious. "You're doing more than anyone has a right to ask of you," he said firmly. "Don't let the noise get to you. Focus on why you started this journey, not for fame or recognition, but because you wanted to make a difference." His words struck a chord. Emily realized that while external validation mattered to some extent, it wasn't the driving force behind her work. What truly fueled her was the desire to leave the world better than she found it, a goal she shared with Charles. From that moment on, she made a conscious effort to tune out the critics and focus on what really mattered, helping people and solving problems. To manage her workload, Emily began delegating tasks to trusted colleagues and mentors. She hired a team to handle media requests, allowing her to dedicate more time to hands-on projects. She also prioritized self-care, scheduling regular breaks to recharge. Charles encouraged these changes, reminding her that even superheroes needed rest. Their partnership evolved further as they navigated this phase together, supporting each other through highs and lows. One of the highlights of this period was Emily's TED Talk, titled "The Power of Believing in Someone." Standing on stage in front of thousands, she recounted her journey, from the lonely days in the orphanage to the groundbreaking inventions that followed. She spoke candidly about the doubts and criticisms she faced along the way, acknowledging that none of her achievements would have been possible without Charles's unwavering faith in her. "I owe everything to the man who took a chance on me," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "He didn't see a problem child or a lost cause. He saw potential, and he believed in it before I even believed in myself." The audience erupted into applause, moved by her story of resilience and gratitude. When Emily stepped off stage, Charles greeted her with open arms, tears streaming down his face. It was a moment neither of them would forget, a culmination of years of hard work, sacrifice, and love. As the years went by, Charles entered his twilight years. His once boundless energy began to wane, and health issues forced him to slow down. But even as his body weakened, his spirit remained strong. Watching Emily thrive brought him immense joy, knowing that his legacy extended far beyond material wealth. Through her, he had given the world a gift far greater than money: hope. When Charles passed away peacefully at the age of 72, Emily inherited not just his estate, but also his values. She continued his tradition of philanthropy, ensuring that other children like her received opportunities to shine. In his honor, she established a foundation dedicated to fostering innovation among young minds, providing scholarships and resources to underprivileged youth. The foundation quickly gained traction, becoming a beacon of possibility for countless aspiring scientists, engineers, and dreamers. Looking back on their journey, Emily reflected on how much they had accomplished together. From the rainy day they met at the orphanage to the global stage where she now stood, theirs was a story of courage, perseverance, and love. They had defied expectations, silenced critics, and proven that sometimes the unlikeliest connections lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. And though Charles was no longer physically present, his influence lived on in everything Emily did. Every invention, every act of kindness, every child whose life was changed carried a piece of him with it. Together, they had rewritten the narrative of what it means to be family, not bound by blood but by belief, trust, and an unshakable bond that transcended time. What lay ahead was uncertain, but Emily faced it with confidence, knowing that Charles's legacy would guide her every step of the way. Their story served as a timeless reminder that believing in someone, even when the world doesn't, can spark revolutions. And in doing so, it leaves an indelible mark on the hearts of generations to come. Emily's life after Charles's passing was a blend of grief and purpose. Losing the man who had believed in her when no one else did left an ache in her heart that never fully healed. But instead of letting sadness consume her, she channeled it into action. Every day she woke up with a renewed determination to honor his memory, not just by continuing their shared mission, but by living the values he had instilled in her: compassion, resilience, and unwavering belief in others. The foundation Emily established in Charles's name quickly became a beacon of hope for underprivileged children around the world. Through scholarships, mentorship programs, and hands-on workshops, it provided opportunities for kids whose potential might otherwise go unnoticed. These weren't just academic initiatives. They were designed to nurture creativity, curiosity, and confidence. Emily often visited schools where the foundation operated, sitting down with students to hear their stories and encourage them to dream big. One such visit took her to a small village nestled in the mountains. The school there consisted of little more than a few tin-roofed classrooms, yet the energy inside was electric. Children crowded around Emily, eager to show her their projects: a windmill made from scrap metal, a water filtration system built using plastic bottles, and even a rudimentary robot powered by solar panels. Their enthusiasm reminded her so much of herself at their age, bright, resourceful, and brimming with ideas waiting to be unleashed. As she walked through the schoolyard, a young boy approached her shyly, holding out a crumpled piece of paper. "I want to be like you when I grow up," he said softly, his eyes wide with admiration. Emily knelt down to his level, taking the paper from him. It was a drawing of what looked like a futuristic city, powered entirely by renewable energy. She smiled, touched by his vision. "You already are like me," she told him gently. "You have dreams, and that makes you unstoppable." Moments like these fueled Emily's drive. She realized that while inventions and innovations were important, inspiring the next generation mattered even more. After all, change wasn't something one person could achieve alone. It took a community working together toward a common goal. And thanks to Charles's example, she understood the profound impact of believing in someone, especially when they doubted themselves. Over time, Emily's influence extended beyond science and technology. She became a global advocate for mental health awareness, speaking openly about the challenges she had faced growing up as a misunderstood child. Her speeches emphasized the importance of embracing individuality and rejecting societal pressures to conform. "Being different isn't a flaw, it's a strength," she would say during interviews. "The world needs diverse thinkers, people who see problems differently and aren't afraid to challenge the status quo." Her words resonated deeply, particularly among young audiences who saw her as a role model. Letters poured in from teenagers struggling with self-doubt, thanking her for showing them that it was okay to stand out. Some credited her with helping them find courage to pursue passions they had once abandoned out of fear or shame. Reading these messages filled Emily with gratitude, knowing that her story had given others permission to embrace their true selves. Despite her success, Emily remained grounded. She still lived in the same penthouse Charles had provided for her, refusing to trade it for anything flashier. To her, the space wasn't just a home. It was a reminder of where she came from and how far she had come. The walls were adorned with photographs of her and Charles, launching rockets in the park, traveling to remote villages, and celebrating milestones together. Each picture told a chapter of their journey, a testament to the bond they had forged against all odds. On quiet evenings, Emily often sat by the window staring out at the city skyline. She thought about Charles frequently, wondering what advice he would give if he were still here. Would he approve of the choices she was making? Did he ever imagine their lives turning out this way? Though she missed him dearly, she found comfort in knowing that his spirit lived on in everything she did. Whether it was mentoring a young inventor or delivering a keynote speech, she carried him with her, drawing strength from the lessons he had taught her. As decades passed, Emily's legacy grew alongside Charles's. Together, they had sparked a ripple effect that touched millions of lives across generations. Former beneficiaries of her foundation went on to become leaders in their fields, carrying forward the torch of innovation and kindness. One former student even developed a groundbreaking medical device inspired by Emily's work, dedicating it to both her and Charles. "They showed me that anything is possible if you believe in yourself and in others," he said during its unveiling. By the time Emily reached her later years, she had earned countless accolades, including multiple Nobel Prizes and humanitarian awards. Yet none of these honors meant as much to her as the simple moments of connection she shared with those she helped. Watching a child light up with excitement over a new discovery or hearing a teenager express gratitude for believing in them brought her far greater joy than any trophy ever could. In her final days, surrounded by loved ones and memories of a life well lived, Emily reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the lonely girl in the orphanage to the woman who had changed the world, hers was a story of transformation, not just of circumstances, but of hearts and minds. And at the center of it all was Charles, the man who had dared to take a chance on her. Their tale served as a timeless reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are the ones we can't explain. Adopting a child others dismissed as too difficult seemed crazy to the outside world. But love, as Emily and Charles proved, defies logic. It sees beyond flaws and failures, recognizing the beauty hidden beneath the surface. It gives people permission to dream, to grow, and to become more than anyone thought possible. And so, long after Emily joined Charles in whatever lay beyond, their story continued to inspire. Statues were erected in their honor, books written about their unlikely partnership, and films made celebrating their extraordinary bond. But the real legacy they left behind wasn't carved in stone or captured on screen. It was etched in the hearts of everyone whose life they touched. Because sometimes, the craziest decisions lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. And in the end, it's not wealth or fame that defines us. It's the connections we make, the lives we change, and the love we share. That, above all else, is what truly lasts.